Is none other than Patrick Amadon. Welcome to Bitcoin Live.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for having me back. I appreciate you inviting me.
Well, it was a pleasure having you on, of course, before. You're like an established glitch artist, NFT artist, crypto artist, but also just a digital artist. I think you've been working in the space for a very long time. For the people who might not know you, could you give a short introduction of who you are and what you've been up to?
Sure. Yeah. No, I appreciate it. Well, first of all, thank you for having me back. You're the first person to reach out when I return to the space, and I always appreciate that. So thank you. Yeah. No, I've been a digital artist for over a decade now. I started off in contemporary art. Hopped on Twitter in 2012. Figured out that an oil painting every 2 months wasn't a content stream, so I figured out what I could do to fix that. And also didn't feel like taking photos of physical art was native to the space. So I glitched one because I thought it looked cool. And then I quickly found myself going down the rabbit hole of glitch art, and people started liking the glitched versions more than the physical versions. And I found myself just making glitch art with no real exit, no real way to make any real money or a living off of it. But I liked it, and everybody liked it, so just made glitch art for almost a decade before I found NFTs. And then got in after Beeple. Saw Beeple, $68 million sale, which was not nearly as interesting as the fact somebody could actually sell digital work. So that was what got me to jump in fully to the space.
I can totally understand that. And Beeple is, of course, a staple name by now. But you've also been to Hong Kong recently, and there's a lot of stuff going on in Hong Kong for quite a while. And especially also when it concerns art, there's some censorship going on there. And I'm not sure if you want to make it too political, but can you sort of explore what you've been up to when you went there, and and what you made and what you tried to say with your amazing work that you created?
No, I appreciate that. Well, let's not pull any punches. You know, I always I didn't go to Hong Kong for this. I did not want to be in Hong Kong for this. I followed Hong Kong since the transition, um, and particularly the protests, um, and just watching the repression happen. Watching the police, watching the rioters detained for peacefully protesting. You just saw over the last couple of years the erosion of freedoms that they once had in the space. And while the trials are going on right now, Art Basel, and Art Week in Hong Kong was going full swing, and you just kept hearing, "Oh, Hong Kong is back! Hong Kong is back!" And it's not back. You see, I don't know. I just saw a lot of the art world just looking at the space, and they just want convenient access to a good art market, and they're willing to just let money buy absolution for what's happened in Hong Kong. So I just wanted to make a piece that would show some solidarity with protesters and what they went through. So a art innovation gallery reached out to me, and they'd reached out to me previously too. They reached out to me about putting up a billboard in Times Square. I said, no thanks. They reached out about putting on some art on a boat in Miami during our Basel. I said, definitely no thanks. But when they said we have a billboard in Hong Kong, I said, oh yeah, I'll do that. That's interesting to me. I was trying to figure out what I could do with that. And I think it's one of the interesting things about digital art now. Just the sheer pervasiveness of digital displays makes digital art far more interesting and with a lot more possibilities than you could have imagined a decade ago. Especially visible locations too. I mean, you look at street art and you're usually around the corner of a building, maybe you stick something on the side of a building. You have such limited options for public visibility. It makes it a little bit more tricky, but here you have billboards intentionally being put up in some of the most public areas of major cities. I mean, this billboard is the largest billboard in Hong Kong. It's right in the middle of Causeway Bay. It's huge. It's a canvas that, you could have only dreamed of, coming from, a physical art background. So I really wanted to put something up there. I was trying to figure out what I could do, what I could get away with. So I figured I'd do a security camera. Obviously, I kind of feel Hong Kong's been turned into a vassal surveillance state for the Chinese government, versus a vibrant democracy. So I put up a security camera. There's some, it says no rioters, only tyranny in the bottom left corner of that. There's also a free Hong Kong graffiti in there on all the frames. But I wanted to do something more interesting than that. So, most of us have seen Fight Club.
Yeah.
I always loved how he snuck in a few frames, into the movies that he was showing. So I said, why don't we do something like that, right? So what I did is I just compiled lists of the Hong Kong 47 and other protesters. And I put their names, their ages, their sentences, snippets of what people went through, whether it was journalists being assaulted by, quote, random thugs and so forth. Just wanted to highlight some of the things that actually happened during the protests and what a lot of these protesters are facing for their role in the protests. And just put that up for everyone to see in the middle of Hong Kong during Art Week. So every 10th frame or so, there's a flashing image of text. And it's a little too quick to see with the naked eye, but if you have a quick camera, you can capture it. But it's also just the fact that it's there, broadcasting.
Because at first, I think they weren't aware how sort of controversial your work was, because, like you said, the frame rate was so high you cannot see it with the naked eye. But once you sort of explained it in an interview, then they sort of took notice and then they pulled it off, right?
Yeah. So it was up for 3 days, which,
that's subversive, right? I mean, that's the ultimate.
Well, yeah, that was kind of the thing. So the Hong Kong Free Press first caught wind of it, and they published an article about what it was, and they had screenshots and the whole thing to showing what was up there. And then immediately, kind of everybody caught on to it after that. So there's pro-Beijing media saying, how insignificant it was, but they're writing news articles about how insignificant it was, which is funny, calling me pro-rioter, which obviously I'm very pro-rioter. So I appreciated that as well. But then also, it was like BBC, AP, kind of major global press picked it up, and all the art trade. So it was really good to see a lot of visibility, a lot of controversy around this, because that was exactly what I wanted to see. I wanted to see the solidarity with the protest movement be noticed, and the Hong Kong people to be noticed, and this to not be forgotten about. So it's been a couple of years.
Yeah, it was in 2019, right?
Yeah. So the morning after the Hong Kong Free Press article came out, I got a text message from the gallery saying, "We need to talk urgently." Urgently is in all caps. And I was driving. I was, I'll get him back in 30 minutes. And then 5 minutes later, it was, "We need to talk now," all caps, the whole thing. And I was like, "Oh, okay. I can imagine what this is about." So I pulled over. I got them on the phone, and they were terrified. Apparently, some people had gone to Sogo, which was the company that owned the billboard, and had threatened them with heavy fines and legal action. So they had immediately taken it down, and then they had contacted, and Sogo contacted the gallery and was like, "What did you do? Look at the position you put us in, like heavy fines, legal action, you're being threatened too." So they wanted to know what was going on. So I explained what had happened, and then they were trying to just get out of their legal jeopardy. So I had to fill out some. They requested that I fill out some legal documentation that just said like they didn't know what I did, they were unaware, they'd been tricked, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't want them to get in trouble for this, but definitely cause some chaos.
But that's I applaud you of what you did, and I think that's wonderful that there are artists that willing to take a stand for these matters. And apparently it was so insignificant that everybody talked about it for quite some time with all the headlines. So
thanks. I'm looking at I can't go to China anymore. I'm looking at a jail sentence if I set foot in China or SAR.
Wow.
There's that, but it's very worth it. I needed it's one thing to put up this artwork in Hong Kong and for it to be noticed, but the piece isn't complete without the government taking it down. I mean, the very fact that the government took it down was kind of the final brushstroke, right?
True.
They take it down, which says, A, this bothered us, and B, something that would have been a perfectly legal expression a few years ago is no longer a legal expression, which just concretely demonstrates the erosion of freedoms of expression in Hong Kong.
And it proves the point of your artwork, right? Because that's what artwork is about, that freedom of expression is no longer possible for artists.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And it's not like it's the first time it happened in Hong Kong, because you also had the LGBTQ artwork that was taken down, and also a remembrance to, I think, Tiananmen Square in 1989 was cancelled or censored. So it's happened quite a few times.
Well, they actually right around this time they actually censored this. I think B movie would be pushing it, but somebody made a slasher film that starred a Winnie the Pooh looking character. And they censored it in China because obviously Xi is very sensitive about any references to the fact that he looks like Winnie the Pooh. So they censored this whole movie from being shown in China based on it. I mean, as much as I wanted to sneak in some Winnie the Pooh graffiti into the piece, but I also wanted to make sure that it went up, because that was so. I felt that might have been enough to get it noticed.
For example, this one is from 2017. It goes way back, right? And it's a really shame, because Hong Kong was a really free area, a free city, a very modern cosmopolitan area for quite a while, right?
Yeah, and I appreciate Lisa Lim too. I mean, she wrote an article on what happened for the New York Times as well. So
yeah. So how is the rebellion or resistance, or what you call it, the people who are protesting? Are they still in Hong Kong? Are they still doing their best to be noticed, or are they still able to organize?
I mean, the freedoms of expression and the freedom to get together are severely limited, and with the amount of surveillance and everything else going on right now, I mean, it is incredibly difficult and very dangerous to get together and talk about these things. So it's just a bad situation. So China has quite effectively squashed protests with severe penalties.
So basically you could argue that it has gotten much worse since then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay,
so really tighten the screws on the whole city. So,
and do you want to sort of continue your art in with the Chinese angle, or do you think like I'll stay clear of it for now?
We'll see. No, I'm there's a few things cooking. So
okay,
we'll return to the show in a few months with more.
I love to see it, and I really appreciate the artists who are sort of making a stand and doing a protest. And but you're also working, I think, on less controversial art. I mean, you're like a world famous glitch artist, so I imagine that you're creating some really awesome pieces in that regard too, right?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, like we talked about, the last year, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's been a minute. Um, I feel like for art to be durable and to sustain relevance, it has to have some meaningful statement. Um, Aesthetic value alone does not maintain. So I feel like there's always got to be something there. So that's a big part, I think, of making art that lasts. So everything's gonna have some political or socioeconomic angle to it. But yeah, right now working on the next thing is going to be a project with Transient Labs on May 23rd. And I'm excited to share that. I think it'll be something that will be helpful to a lot of artists. So I'm excited to share what that is then.
But even pieces like these, I mean, they're really sort of mind blowing. The longer you look at it, I think it's what you said earlier
Yeah.
with the frame rate. The frame rate is so high that there's stuff in there that you sort of you have to see it. You have to keep seeing it in order to see the whole thing, right?
Thank you. Yeah. No, it's I don't know. Oscar Wilde had a good quote about once you feel you understand a piece of art, it's dead to you. So I think there's something interesting about that statement.
Yeah, I think you have to be able to disappear in a piece of art. I'm a big fan of Theodor Adorno, and he said sort of art that is made for consumption isn't really art, because it's more like you can possess it, you can sort of have it, but you want to actually you want to sort of be challenged or disappear into a piece of art. It has to be bigger than you. So I think that's sort of also what you're creating, right?
I love that. And I have to look up some of his work.
And but what's also really nice about your art is that it's really sort of contemporary. So it has a lot of references. I mean, this is like the Bored Apes. So it is also very recognizable, instantly sort of recognizable, and it has this feeling of familiarity. But it's also sort of very deep and layered. Can you sort of also explain, because I imagine that many people didn't see the first show that we did.
Yeah.
Sort of, can you tell us a little bit about your process and some of the things that you do with your artwork and that makes it so unique?
Sure. My process is, I guess, called mixed digital. I still do physical work for the majority of my work, whether that's canvas, wood, wall, oil, spray paint. I also do a lot of photography, and then the glitch work. So, if you scroll back up to the WAGMI one right above this, yeah, there we go. Right. So this, I graffitied an old CRT TV because
Yeah.
that's the nostalgic era. And everyone in the game is so it's a game show called WAGMI. Everyone in the game is a friend from Venice who attends my NFT meetups on Thursdays. But the idea is like, it's a crapshoot who wins, right? And we only know the winners because the losers typically vanish from space. So it ends up being the self-selecting thing where, yeah, we're all going to make it because we're the ones that got lucky. There's a lot of very smart people that just didn't get lucky and are no longer with us here. So just the idea of just kind of luck, chance, winning the lottery, etc. But so there's something I think really toxic about the whole idea of we're all going to make it. And you just see that, you see the GMs, you see kind of the whole culture. And I think there's a lot of it's very sweet and genuine, but I also think there's a negative element to that that's not talked about enough. yeah, so I dragged this TV around downtown LA until I found the right spot for it. And I found, a perfect trash pile with some pill bottles, some needles, and some just made the TV feel right at home. So that was where I wanted to broadcast, the episode of this game show here.
Yeah, so it's almost like a still life. So you sort of want to highlight those sort of sharp edges of the culture and sort of critique the American dream, I guess.
Ideally, right? I mean, I feel like we always have to be critical, and I think everything, there's gray area with everything, and I think exploring gray area around commonly held opinions, I think, is interesting, especially when it has to do with culture and kind of what's going on in our space. So you look at kind of what maintains relevance, and I think we have a unique niche, a little our own history, our own culture, and I feel like exploring kind of what it is that we're doing is interesting, because I think there's a lot of really good things. I think there's a lot of really good things around decentralization, around sovereignty, around individual responsibility and ownership, freedoms of expression, freedom from censorship. So I think that what we're doing is interesting and important for the broad public discussion. I feel like a lot of what we do here should be included more. But we also have our own unique culture too. So I think kind of exploring where those two things intersect and kind of what we're all doing here, I think.
But there's of course
for a long time.
Also things that go wrong within the crypto space and NFT space. I mean, I love the space, and it's really dynamic, and it has so many different aspects and features. This high art, low art. I mean, everything in between. Cowboys, good cops, bad cops. But can you also sort of tell us a little bit about what you don't like about the space, or what you might want to see changed, or sort of disturbs you?
Well, I think there's just a lot of people that are, wow. I think there's a lot of people that are new to all of this. Whether they're new to artists, maybe they were, in graphic design or something, they're transitioning to art, whether they are kind of newly crypto rich and they're getting into collecting now. I think there's just a growing appreciation for art and a growing understanding for art. So I think you just kind of see everything. But yes, I feel like you just see a lot of pandering. A lot of stuff that's being designed to appeal based on other things that have appealed, and I feel like I just drive narrative and story and relevance and cultural significance and kind of socio-political kind of elements that make up critical art from the standpoint of the traditional contemporary art world. What makes art good there, I think, will ultimately be what makes art good here. And I don't know, I just feel like cautionary tale about prioritizing kind of narrative over aesthetic. Skulls are cool, but the fact that it's a skull doesn't really do anything without a story behind it. True. Plus, I mean, you just see, you see 1.5 million X copy knockoffs, and art doesn't reward second place. There's someone who creates something, and then, like with everything, there's 1 million derivatives, but those don't really hold up in the art world. I think Sarah Zucker said it really well. She said everybody needs to find their own rabbit hole and go deep in it. There's an infinite number of styles, an infinite number of directions you can go with your art. I would just really strongly encourage people and collectors to identify who is doing their own thing. And oftentimes people doing their own thing because it doesn't look like something else isn't something they have quote comparables for. You see that a lot too. I feel like a lot of the analysis around art is the same analysis being applied to more financial valuations, because that is the metrics that people are used to, but they don't hold up in the same way. If anything, because something looks like something else, I would say that's, typically a negative for that thing. You want something that doesn't look like something else, that's telling a story that you care about. That's what has a higher likelihood of actually becoming durable and sustainable over time. And I also think that artists that have been doing this for a while is really important. I don't think that's appreciated enough, because even now, over the last 2 years, you've seen a lot of artists show up, make a few big sales, and then vanish, take extended mental health breaks, whatever it is, but I mean, if you're not here and creating, your work will trend to zero. There's nothing inherently valuable about any of this. You may end up with a piece that you like, or maybe you bought a piece that you thought would be valuable, but you don't actually like, and then you just have a JPEG.
So it's kind of like with certain movies, people want to go see a movie, with racing cars, like Fast and the Furious, because it has racing cars and action, but it does, it's sort of like redundant, and then you got like 9 different. I don't know where they are now, but it sort of keeps they keep repackaging the same thing all over and over again, and it keeps selling also, right? That's the remarkable thing with a franchise like that you think like,
the first John Wick was great. We didn't need the second, third, and fourth.
Oh.
So I would have much rather invested in the first, and then been the guy who picked up the fourth because it was slightly cheaper, but reminded me of the first.
True. And then you think like, why don't they stop, right? Because they had a good thing, and then they sort of ruin it by continuing, and then sort of the magic wears off.
Yeah.
Especially True Detective. Just want to throw it out there. I love
also good. Yeah, exactly. When they brought Vince Vaughn in, it went south quick.
So as an artist, you want to make something truly unique, something unlike anything else, and I think you want to suffuse it with your sort of personality and character, your being, and that sort of creates your aesthetic, right? But I guess some artists, they want to try too hard to create an aesthetic, and then they cannot create one because they're overly focused on it.
I think you just have to lean into your personal experience, tell stories that it's really hard, right? I think that's just it's not easy. It's easy to create an aesthetic. It's easy to copy an aesthetic, and if it's easy to do, ultimately it doesn't matter. But every medium, whether it's glitch, whether it's photography, whether it's the rendered work or AI, everything offers different opportunities and different qualities about the medium that allow you to tell a story in a different way. So the people that really master their mediums understand how their specific medium can tell a story in a different way than other mediums can. And when you lean into that, then the work can become very interesting. Right? It's like, why is this AI and not glitch? Why is this rendered and not glitch? Why is this glitch and not AI? And as long as there's a compelling reason for it, then it could become interesting. And then you look at the artist's experience themselves, right? What about the artist? What about their experience gives their work perspective in a way that is uniquely theirs? And that's one of the fascinating things about the space. I mean, one things we have done, I think, very well is decentralize access to making a living here, right? Yeah. Like we talked about before, you don't need a Yale MFA in order to make a living making art these days. So you have artists from around the world in places traditionally that the art world has been very, very, very difficult to access from, being able to make a living making art. I mean, look at like Osinachi Nigeria. Look at Ellie the Great. Look at Carlos Marcial. I mean, look at these fantastic artists coming from places that traditionally the art world would not have been open to. And I think that's fantastic. But I think that also the reason that those three have done so well is because their artwork is telling stories that's unique to their experience, and they're all using their own mediums in very developed, advanced ways because they've spent so much time there. They know what stories they can tell, and they know how to best tell their stories through their mediums. And you combine those two and you have really dynamic, interesting art that's going to last. And I feel like there's no easy answer to any of this. It really is just about having a perspective from a life of experience and telling it in an interesting way through your medium. None of this, none of this has anything to do with aesthetics, really. I mean, aesthetics are helpful. It's nice if it looks cool, but it's really kind of the icing on the cake. I mean, you go to most contemporary art shows, and you're like, that doesn't look good. Why did they do it? And then they tell you about it, like, okay, sometimes you get it, sometimes you won't. Like, a lot of it's kind of nonsense. But when they do hit it, it's interesting. But it always comes back to what's the objective of the artist, what's the narrative, and why is that relevant? Why did they do this? And I don't think you hear that nearly enough in the space. You never why did you make this? I think it's a far more essential question than we really consider it to be right now in the space.
Well, those are the questions that we like to ask. What drives an artist and why do they make the amazing art that they make? And even if it's, just, fun art, I mean, there's also, the Bored Apes and the Pepes. I mean, I'm not, a big fan of that kind of art, but they are sort of fun and they bring the space to life, right? I mean, they give you a smile.
And that's great. There's a role for all of it. Not everything has to be critical art, right?
True.
There's plenty of stuff that's fun. There's plenty of stuff that's you can build communities around. So by all means, that's excellent. I think just like deconflating like what we are all doing here. If that's what you're doing, cool, do it. They're just not the same thing. I think understanding how the whole space works, I think, is important, and teasing apart what's what. PFPs are not art. Art is not PFPs.
Yeah.
Pepe and the memes are separate thing altogether. I feel like just understanding that is helpful.
So have you also? Oh, sorry, go on.
No, please.
So have you also explored AI within your work, or is that something that you already do, or that you want to do, or how do you see AI and art work together, or not?
Well, we talk about telling a story that has durable relevance. AI is definitely something I'm exploring right now. I haven't expressed that in my work to date, but I mean, look, AI is the most transformative technology that we'll see in our lifetime and conceivably for, I don't know, throughout human history. I mean, AI is truly transformative. And if you look at what makes art relevant, AI is going to have more of a socioeconomic impact on the way things work than I think most anything else. So I feel like incorporating that, especially at this early stage of AI where we're just beginning to integrate it in a really serious way, I think is probably a really good choice to give your art the best chance of maintaining relevance for the long term. So yeah, it's definitely something I'm interested in. I'm just trying to figure out an interesting way of doing it. But it's on the radar for sure.
Like you sort of say, with sort of the meta perspective, by taking the medium itself as sort of your angle or your perspective on it.
Yeah, I mean, look, I love the idea of AI. I love the idea of incorporating AI into the process, right? I do like physical work, photography, and the glitch work. I feel like there's an angle to insert AI into that process. And I love artists that are doing interesting things, whether they're training their own models, whether incorporating AI in interesting ways. I'm not sold on prompt-based AI work. I feel like anything you look at from perspective of the friction of creation, like how difficult was that really to do, and what are you trying to say with it? I feel like you really have to nail it if it's a prompt-based thing. So I'm more interested to see artists incorporate it as a layer or additional element or part of the narrative within their pieces.
And do you see any danger? I mean, you got this whole discussion in many different fields, but also one of them is within art, the art world. Will it take away the beauty of art, or even what makes us human? You could go down that route. How do you see that whole sort of philosophical conundrum?
I love it. Look, I mean, you had digital cameras did not destroy the lifetime, did not destroy the livelihood of photographers. It just highlighted who was actually a good photographer and who wasn't. And I feel like the same with AI. There's no reason that 8 years of art school and training should be a determining factor in who can make art and who can't. It's really just a technical execution of a vision. So if AI can solve technical execution of a vision in a much simpler way than having to spend 8 years in art school, fantastic. I love it. It democratizes art. It democratizes access. And it really just boils it down to who has vision. If you have an artistic vision, but you don't have the means to execute it, and you can through AI, all of a sudden you have that whole outlet for your art, your creativity, and your vision. And I think that's fantastic. If it opens it up to more artists being able to execute a vision, I feel like it's an incredibly positive thing. Are there problems with it? Do I care about AI scraping my work and including it in the algorithm? No, my work's all CCO. I feel like we're moved past this IP rights nonsense. People can do whatever they want with my work. If AI wants to scrape it, great. If you want to scrape it, great. I feel like we have provenance, we have blockchain. We don't need the existing structure of intellectual property rights and so forth. It's not like I'm going to go sell my work to Facebook to use in a marketing campaign. So I don't care about protecting it in that regard. And if artist wants to use it as some element, fantastic. We have provenance and blockchain to determine, the
Provenance.
the provenance of it. So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. But and then, do you think there will ultimately be a day that you have an AI artist? AI will sort of reach that level.
you know what? I think AI will be able to create better and better art. Obviously, do I think that it'll completely replace artists? No, definitely not. I mean, you look at so much of the contemporary work being done right now. You have people using techniques that were used 200 years ago. You have people using old techniques. It really just comes down to the narrative you want to tell with your process. And because there's so many different narratives you can tell by making choices about process, AI won't replace really anything in that regard. But again, it's back to narrative, back to process. I mean, everything you do in art is a choice. And discussion of your choice and why you did it and why, is what makes the piece. You put a piece on a wall and people look at it and say, okay, that's cool. The experience of art is over at that point. What you want in a piece of art is you want to put it on a wall, and then you want to be able to tell a story about the piece of art you have on the wall. And you don't tell a story about the piece of art by describing what it looks like. You tell the story of a piece of art by telling you the artist's narrative about the piece of art. Oh, here's why they chose to do this. Here's how they constructed it. There's so many different options you have when you, as a collector, are describing a work that you've collected to a group of people. And I feel like as an artist, you want to tell stories and you want to give people stories. And you have so many different elements and options to be able to do that. Describing what something looks like is not really an interesting one. And it's also why I feel like there's deprioritization of aesthetic ultimately. And I think AI will just accelerate that. AI will commoditize aesthetics in a very interesting way. If it's easy to create what you want something to look like, then it kind of takes the appeal or a little bit of the luster off something that looks good, because we all know how easy it was to make. Mm-hmm. So what does that do? It strips off this, superficial element off of the art itself, deprioritizes that a little bit, and gets people to refocus on why you made the choices you made, and how your art is telling an interesting story, which is ultimately what a lot of us want to get back to. Like, we want to get to the place where we're actually talking about the choices and the narrative and why a piece is interesting, not about, you know, what something is. That is, yes, the Hong Kong piece was a security camera. Cool, we're done. Like, you know, it's like, it has a security camera, some graffiti, like, done. We like, our story's over at that point. Like, it's not interesting. So
yeah, so and then of course a piece of art like the security camera that you put on the billboard in Hong Kong, it also gets its own life, right? It gets its own history, the sort of the reaction to it from the CCP and, you know, all the Western medias, and how it sort of got this discussion going. It all becomes part of that piece, almost like a blockchain, right?
exactly. I mean, ultimately, if you're showing that piece of work, you have this whole story you can talk about with the work, and I feel like that's kind of what you want to do with art. Like, you want to tell a story, and you want to give people the opportunity to tell a story. And for the art to last, the story has to be interesting, relevant, and sustainable. And you talk about AI. I mean, look, like, AI has some good things, but AI is also going to enable surveillance states like we've never seen before. AI is going to enable the surveillance of chat, of Twitter, of your online presence, of you physically. I mean, New York has 5 cameras pointing at you at any moment on any street you're walking down. You plug some AI into that, and you'll be able to track every citizen's movement within the entire city. You look at countries that are more aggressively pursuing that, like China, Russia, Iran, and it becomes a pretty scary combination of things.
I recently, I think it was yesterday or the day before, I saw another piece on sort of the security, well, the surveillance state that you're sort of mentioning. And one of the things that I find really remarkable is that China chose the word Skynet to to describe their system.
Yeah.
I mean, haven't they seen Terminator or?
Yeah. They really don't even care at this point. They're just saying what it is.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, they're very bland or very blunt
they
about
know
it.
they know you can't protest at this point, so they're just call it Skynet. They're just going for it.
But it's like a, art or real life imitating art, right? Because basically we see this dystopian vision portrayed in many amazing sci-fi movies, and also some really redundant sci-fi movies. But it's sort of, they copy paste, or at least basically it's the artwork that comes to life in reality, right?
Yeah,
Including
I mean,
the name even.
I think there is a more important role for artists as we progress through a lot of these really difficult issues. You can say things with art you can't otherwise say, and I think it's really important. I think it's incumbent on artists to do something. I don't.
You could say that every artist and every artwork, every great artwork is like a cipher, right? It's sort of like encrypted because, every person is unique, is idiosyncratic, and a great artist sort of brings that out or expresses that in his or her artwork, right? So it's sort of like a cipher that people need to read or decode almost. And that keeps it alive, right? As long as it is encrypted or sort of like this windowless monad.
Yeah, I know. I love that, and I'm definitely I'm gonna include you on this next piece here too.
Yeah, thank you. That would be great.
Yeah,
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I mean, you make. Oh, go on.
On that topic, I think, yeah, we'll work together on this next one.
That's really awesome. It's a great honor. I mean, you're one of the really great artists in the field. So I always love having you back on the space on this platform and to discuss these things, because you also have like this very sort of philosophical view how you look at things, and this really sort of deep thinking that goes into your art, and that you also see within your art, right? I mean, That's what we mentioned earlier, right? That your art is very layered, and that there's a lot to sort of decode within your artwork.
Thank you. I appreciate that a lot.
So can you tell us a little bit more about then the project that you are working on? Can you sort of lift the curtain a little bit?
Yeah, so it's going to be a new type of smart contract
Cool.
for artists that I think will be I think it'll be useful. So I'm going to be sharing that, and then I'm going to be talking about it at NFC Summit in Lisbon, and then I'm going to be doing a solo show in Seoul, highlighting the piece I'm making. So I'll be doing a piece of art that's a new type of smart contract with Transient that will be available for other artists to use as well. So that's the most I've shared so far on it. But it's the least I can do on the show here, because I appreciate you.
Thanks for the scoop, and that sounds super exciting. I can't wait to to see it and to hear about it more. And yeah, you should definitely come back on to talk about it when the time is there. I'm really I'm really excited right now.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
So yeah, I mean, we covered a lot of topics. Is there anything else that you sort of want to highlight that we sort of missed out on?
Well, I mean, there's always lots to talk about, right?
True.
But no, I just want to say, thank you very much. I mean, it's obviously, it's a pleasure speaking with you. I appreciate your perspective. I appreciate how much research you do leading into this. It shows. I notice, and it's really appreciated. I enjoy our conversations tremendously, and I'm very happy to see how well you've done and how the show has developed. So thank you for having me again.
And thank you for making these amazing pieces of art, and also for standing up for freedom and liberty, even in places where there hardly is any. And I also really hope that people like yourself and maybe the people who are listening to these shows, that they will keep fighting for these basic human rights all over the world, and to spread this sort of spirit of liberty and then freedom of expression, because we have to keep it alive also in the Western world. Like you say, AI is wonderful, but it can also lead to a surveillance state, as we have yet to experience. So yeah, maybe with a sort of final question is, how do you think we can sort of resist this temptation? Because it's a temptation for authorities everywhere, right? Even if they're democratic, it's very tempting to take the easy route and to give everyone perfect security and protection by using means and measures that ultimately lead to a very dark future.
I mean, I feel like we're in a very precarious position right now. I think you can see in a very different way how quickly a lot of these freedoms we take for granted can vanish. Maybe a little bit differently now versus even 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. Nothing that we have is a given, and everything that we have can be taken away very easily. And you see people not appreciating privacy enough, and people not appreciating privacy, not appreciating what we're doing kind of in this space. You see people willing to give up their privacy for a few clicks on Instagram. You see people willing to give up their privacy on social media. You see younger generations, especially, the Z's and younger, have no expectation of privacy, nor do they really seem to care about it at all. And that's the slippery slope towards a surveillance state, because unless people resist that, I feel like we could very, very quickly find ourselves in a much darker place than we do now. And with these structures in place, you see just a couple votes here, a couple votes there, and all of a sudden, a button gets turned on and we're just in a very dark place. I mean, look at what happened in Hong Kong. You can't even protest anymore because they can find you. Russia, you'll be in jail. Even Turkey. I mean, look what's happening with their elections right now. You know, you look at Iran, and I feel like it's naive to say, oh, those are those countries that can't happen, you know, in the US or in Europe, but it definitely can. And I feel like knowing that and taking stands and fighting and causing as much friction for, you know, or against surveillance and privacy infringing ideas and programs, I think is just critical to sustaining as long as we can. Do I think we'll lose? Absolutely. But, you know, I'd like to see it go as well as it can in my lifetime. So.
Yeah. So we should resist, and we should also, I guess, be aware of what is happening in your area, but also within your country, like your political situation. What are people, you know, what kind of laws and regulations are being crafted, and you know, what could they lead to? So we should also, you know, hold our representatives responsible and ask for transparency, but also, you know, like you say, demand privacy, the right to privacy, and especially in those CBDCs.
Yeah,
Definitely. So I'm totally in agreement with you, and I'm really happy that you're out there, that you're one of these people that are sort of vocal about this and spreading this knowledge and information to as many people as you can, also through your art, but also doing interviews like these. And I can't wait to have you back on.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure. I really appreciate you.
Yes, and with that, that's the end of the show. Go check out Patrick Amadon. His handle's here. I'll link everything underneath the video, our YouTube video. And is there anything else you want to share before we leave?
No, I just want to say thank you, and look forward to our next chat.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.